Hey everyone, have you ever heard a story so incredible, so completely unexpected, that you couldn't stop thinking about it for days and days afterward? Well, stick with me, because what I'm about to tell you is exactly that kind of story. And trust me, by the end you're going to want to share this with everyone you know, because it's about something really important that affects all of us. Before we dive in, make sure you're comfortable because this is going to take a little while, but I promise it'll be worth every single minute of your time. So imagine you're sitting in an auditorium, and this really old man walks out onto the stage, someone you might recognize from movies your grandparents watch, someone who's been around forever it seems like. And instead of telling you about his famous career or funny stories from Hollywood, he tells you something completely different, something you never expected to hear. That's basically what happened when this famous movie maker decided to share something super personal and kind of amazing with a whole bunch of people who came to hear him speak one night. This man, who we'll call Mr. Eastwood because that's a cool name that sounds like someone from a Western movie, started by saying thank you to everyone for coming out that evening. And he told them right away that what he was going to talk about wasn't what they probably expected at all. Now, Mr. Eastwood mentioned that most people probably thought he'd talk about making movies, which makes sense because he's made tons of them over his long life, including cowboy movies and police movies and war movies and all kinds of other films. He even made a joke about once having a conversation with an empty chair during a political event, which some people thought was pretty weird at the time, but he said that was nothing, absolutely nothing compared to what he was about to share with everyone listening that night. Can you imagine being in that audience, wondering what on earth this old man is about to tell you that could be stranger than talking to an empty chair in front of millions of people? I mean, that would definitely make you sit up and pay attention, right? And that's exactly what he wanted, for people to really listen to what came next. Mr. Eastwood told everyone that he was now over 90 years old, which is really, really old if you think about it, like older than most people's great-grandparents. He said that in all those 9 decades of living, he'd seen an incredible amount of stuff. He directed movies about heroes and bad guys, about people finding redemption, which means making up for bad things they did, and about revenge, which is when people try to get back at others who hurt them. He'd met presidents of the United States, astronauts who went to space, and all kinds of legendary famous people that most of us only read about in books or see in history documentaries. But then he said something that probably made everyone in that room lean forward in their seats. He said that nothing, and he really emphasized the word nothing, had prepared him for what happened to him about 3 years before that night. And what was it? He was going to tell them about the night that Jesus Christ appeared to him in a dream. Now, before you think this sounds crazy or made up, just hang on, because that's exactly what Mr. Eastwood said people might think. He told the audience that he knew how it sounded, that he understood if people started feeling uncomfortable or wanted to check their watches to see how much longer they'd have to sit there listening. But he asked them, and he's asking us too, to just hear him out, to listen to the whole story before deciding what to think about it. He made it really clear that he's not a preacher, meaning he's not someone who normally talks about religious stuff for a living. He's not trying to get elected to any government position, and he's definitely not trying to sell anything like books or videos or whatever. He's just an old man who spent most of his super long life squinting into the bright California sun while making movies and trying to keep his life together and his head on straight, which is a funny way of saying trying to stay sane and sensible. He explained that he's never been someone who had mystical experiences before, which are like magical or supernatural things that can't be explained by science. He'd never had spiritual visions or anything like that. He described himself as a practical man, someone who believes in things he can see with his eyes, touch with his hands, and build with his own effort and work. That's the kind of person he'd always been, someone who dealt with reality, not dreams or visions or supernatural stuff. But this thing that happened to him, this dream or vision or whatever you want to call it, was different. He said it was as real as anything he'd ever experienced in his entire 90-plus years of life, and coming from someone who's experienced as much as he has, that's saying something pretty huge. So let me tell you about the night it happened, because the details are actually really interesting. It was a Tuesday night in late September, and Mr. Eastwood remembered that specific detail really clearly. He'd spent that whole day working on ranch business up in a place called Carmel, which is a beautiful area in California near the ocean. He said his body was tired, But it was the good kind of tired that comes from doing physical work all day, like when you've been running around outside playing or helping with chores, not the mental exhaustion you get from thinking really hard or concentrating on homework for hours. For dinner that evening, he'd eaten something simple and healthy, nothing fancy or complicated. Just some grilled chicken and vegetables that came from his own garden, along with a glass of water, because he doesn't drink alcohol much anymore since he's so old and has learned that keeping things simple is usually the best way to live. He went to bed pretty early that night, around 9 o'clock in the evening, which might seem early to some people, but makes sense for someone his age. The windows in his bedroom were open, and he could hear the Pacific Ocean in the distance, making that constant sound of waves crashing that never stops, that eternal rhythm that he'd been falling asleep to for decades and decades. He said it's a sound that usually brings him peace and calmness, that reminds him of how incredibly small all of us are when you think about the hugeness of the universe and how long the earth has been around. That night, he fell asleep quickly, which he mentioned doesn't always happen when you're as old as he is, because sometimes older people have trouble sleeping. And that's when something absolutely extraordinary happened to him. He found himself in a dream, but immediately he knew this wasn't like any dream he'd ever had before in his entire long life. You know how dreams usually work, right? They're weird and jumpy, with things not making sense, scenes changing randomly without any logic, people appearing and disappearing for no reason, everything all fragmented and chaotic like a movie that's been cut up and put back together wrong. But this dream wasn't like that at all. This dream was crystal clear, super focused, and organized in a way that made perfect sense. In fact, he said that for lack of a better way to describe it, this dream was somehow more real than real life, which sounds impossible, but that's what he experienced. In this incredibly vivid dream, Mr. Eastwood was standing in a place that looked like the high desert areas of Nevada or Arizona. You know those places out west that are mostly flat with some mountains in the distance, very little vegetation, just lots of open space under a huge sky. It was somewhere he'd filmed movies before, so it felt familiar to him, like a place he knew even though he couldn't name exactly where it was. The sky above him was that deep, endless blue color that you only see in the American West, so bright and intense it almost hurts to look at. The sun was beginning to set, which means it was getting close to evening time, and the light was painting everything around him in shades of gold and amber, those warm, orangey-yellow colors that make everything look kind of magical. The air was perfectly still without even a breath of wind, and there was this silence that he described as being both empty and full at the same time, which is a weird thing to say, but somehow makes sense, like the quiet was so complete that it became its own kind of presence. And then, in that silent desert landscape, he saw someone. There was a person standing about 30 feet away from him, which is like the length of a big classroom, or maybe a little more. And here's the really incredible part. Mr. Eastwood said he knew immediately, without any doubt whatsoever, who this person was. He didn't have to guess or figure it out or ask. He just knew with absolute certainty. It was Jesus Christ standing there in the desert with him. Now, you might be wondering how he could possibly know that just by looking at someone. And that's a totally fair question. He said he couldn't really explain how he knew. It was just knowledge that came from somewhere deeper than his thinking mind, deeper than his 5 senses of sight and hearing and touch and taste and smell. It was the kind of knowing that comes from your soul or your heart or whatever you want to call that deepest part of yourself. But here's something really interesting that Mr. Eastwood made sure to point out. Jesus wasn't dressed the way you usually see him in paintings or movies or Christmas plays. He wasn't wearing long flowing robes or sandals or anything like that. Instead, he was wearing completely normal, regular clothes, the kind of stuff you might see anyone wearing if they were doing work outside. He had on jeans, which are just regular blue pants that tons of people wear. He had on a work shirt, like the kind with buttons that people wear when they're doing manual labor or working on a farm or ranch. And he was wearing boots, sturdy shoes for walking and working. Mr. Eastwood said Jesus looked exactly like a carpenter, which actually makes total sense when you think about it, because that's what Jesus actually was during his time on earth. He worked with wood and built things with his hands. He looked like someone who understood what it meant to sweat from hard work, to build something from nothing using skill and effort and patience. Then Mr. Eastwood tried to describe Jesus' face, and you could tell this was something he'd thought about 1,000,000 times since that night, trying to find the right words. He said the face was weathered, which means it looked like it had been out in the sun and wind for years, with lines and character to it. But at the same time, it was somehow ageless, like you couldn't really tell if this person was 30 or 50 or 100 years old. The face was strong, but also gentle at the same time, which seems like it should be contradictory, but somehow wasn't. And the eyes, oh man, Mr. Eastwood really spent time talking about the eyes. He said Jesus' eyes were dark and deep, like you could look into them forever and never reach the bottom. And when Jesus looked at him, Mr. Eastwood felt like he was being seen completely, like every single thing about him was visible, every mistake he'd ever made in his life, every good thing he'd done, every moment when he doubted himself, and every moment when he was brave. And here's what's really amazing. There was no judgment in that look, no sense of Jesus being angry or disappointed or critical. There was only understanding and love, pure unconditional love, that accepted everything about who Mr. Eastwood was. Jesus started walking toward where Mr. Eastwood was standing, moving slowly and calmly, and Mr. Eastwood discovered that he couldn't move at all. But it wasn't because he was frozen with fear like in a nightmare where you can't run away from something scary. It was because he didn't want to move. He wanted to stay exactly where he was in that moment, in that presence, experiencing what he was experiencing. When Jesus got to about 10 feet away, which is like maybe twice the height of a tall adult, he stopped walking and smiled. Mr. Eastwood described it as a small, quiet smile, the kind of knowing smile that says, I know you're confused right now, but everything's going to be okay, don't worry. It was the kind of smile that makes you feel safe and understood. And then Jesus spoke, and his voice was deep and calm, with this quality of authority that didn't come from being loud or forceful, but from absolute certainty and confidence. Clint, he said, using Mr. Eastwood's first name, and just hearing Jesus say his actual name made something tighten up in Mr. Eastwood's chest, made him feel emotional in a way he couldn't quite describe. I've come to tell you something important about America, Jesus continued. Mr. Eastwood just nodded, because he didn't know what else to do. I mean, imagine if you were standing there in front of Jesus Christ, what would you do? This is a man who has talked to presidents and directed huge Hollywood movies with hundreds of people, someone who's been in charge and in control his whole life. But standing there in front of Jesus, he felt like a little child, unsure and small and humble. Jesus continued talking, and he said, I know you're wondering why I'm here talking to you, why I chose you specifically, and why now at this particular time in history. You've never been a particularly religious man, Clint. You've had your doubts about God and faith. You've had your questions that you couldn't find answers to. You've basically made your peace with the idea that some things just can't be known or proven, and you've been okay with that uncertainty. And then Jesus said something really important. He said, and that's okay with me. I don't need your perfection. I never did need people to be perfect. What I need right now, at this specific moment in time, is your voice. I need you to share a message. Jesus paused in his speaking and looked out across that desert landscape, and Mr. Eastwood looked in the same direction, following his gaze. The sun was sinking even lower in the sky now, getting closer to the horizon, and the shadows were growing longer and longer across the sand and rocks. Then Jesus said one word that seemed to carry so much weight, America. And there was something in the way he said it, this mixture of affection, like when you talk about someone you love, and sadness like when you're disappointed in someone who's let you down. Do you know what America was supposed to be? Jesus asked, turning back to look at Mr. Eastwood. And Mr. Eastwood shook his head no, because even though he thought he knew the answer, like freedom and opportunity and the pursuit of happiness and all those things we learn about in school, all those ideals that the country was founded on and that people fight wars to defend, standing there in front of Jesus, he realized he didn't really know, not in the deep way that Jesus knew. America was meant to be a light, Jesus said, and his words were careful and meaningful. Not the only light in the world, never that. I never intended one country to be the only source of good in the world, but a light nonetheless, one important light among others. It was meant to be a place where people could start completely over, where past mistakes could be forgiven and left behind, where a person's worth and value wasn't determined by who their parents were or what family they were born into, but by their character, by the kind of person they chose to be. and by the choices they made every single day. America was supposed to be built on the idea that every single human being has dignity and value and worth, that everyone has the right to life and liberty and the pursuit of meaning and purpose in their existence. When Jesus said all this, you could tell these weren't just fancy words. This was what America was actually created to be. Then Jesus took a step closer to Mr. Eastwood, close enough that he could probably reach out and touch him if he wanted to. But somewhere along the way, Jesus said with that sad tone in his voice, "You've lost sight of that original vision and purpose." Not all of you, not completely. There are still people who remember and who try to live by those ideals. But enough people have forgotten that it's time for a reminder, time for someone to speak up and say something. Finally, Mr. Eastwood found his voice and was able to speak. "What do you mean?" he asked. "What have we lost? What are you talking about specifically?" And Jesus looked at him with those incredibly deep, knowing eyes that seemed to see everything. "You've become divided," Jesus said simply, stating it like an obvious fact. "You've forgotten something really important. You've forgotten that before you are Republican or Democrat, before you are conservative or liberal, before you are black or white, before you are rich or poor, you are first and foremost human beings created in the image of God. You are brothers and sisters. You are family, all of you, every single one." Mr. Eastwood said he felt something twist uncomfortably in his gut when Jesus said this because he knew immediately that it was absolutely true. God knows he'd seen it happening everywhere around him. The anger that people have toward each other, the contempt, which means the feeling that someone else is worthless or beneath you, the way people talk past each other instead of actually talking to each other and listening, the way Americans have turned their neighbors and fellow citizens into enemies over politics, over opinions about issues, over things that honestly, when you think about eternity and what really matters in the universe, matter so much less than we think they do in the moment. Jesus wasn't done though. He continued, "You've made idols of your ideologies." Now, an idol is something you worship or put above everything else in importance. And ideology means a set of political beliefs or ideas. So Jesus was saying that both sides, both conservatives and liberals, both Republicans and Democrats, have taken their political positions and elevated them, lifted them up to the level of religious doctrine, treating political opinions like their sacred religious truth that can never be questioned. "You've decided," Jesus went on, "that anyone who disagrees with you isn't just wrong. They're not just someone who has a different opinion or sees things differently. They're evil. They're a bad person. They're your enemy. And in doing so, in treating people this way, you've forgotten how to love. You've forgotten how to forgive people when they hurt you or make mistakes. You've forgotten how to actually listen to what someone else is saying instead of just waiting for your turn to talk or thinking about how to argue back." This is really powerful stuff if you think about it, because it describes exactly what we see on the news and on social media every single day, doesn't it? People yelling at each other, people assuming the worst about anyone who thinks differently, people refusing to even try to understand another perspective. Then Jesus started walking again across that desert, and Mr. Eastwood walked right beside him, their boots making crunching sounds on the dry earth under their feet. As they walked, Jesus said, "When I came to earth over 2,000 years ago, I told people to love their enemies. Not just to tolerate them, not just to coexist with them like you have to share space with someone you don't like, but to actually love them, to genuinely care about their well-being." He paused to let that sink in, then continued, "Do you know how radical that was? Do you know how radical that still is today? Back in my time, the Pharisees and the Sadducees, who were different religious groups, hated each other. The Jews and the Samaritans, who were different ethnic and religious groups, despised one another. The Romans oppressed everyone, used their military power to control and hurt people. And I came along and said, love your enemies, pray for the people who persecute you and treat you badly. And if someone strikes you on one cheek, turn to them the other cheek also, meaning don't fight back. Respond to violence with peace." Jesus stopped walking and turned to face Mr. Eastwood completely, looking right into his eyes. "That message hasn't changed, Clint," he said seriously. "It's as true right now in your time as it was 2,000 years ago in my time. But your country, America, has forgotten it completely. You've decided that it's more important to win arguments and elections than to love people. You've decided it's more important to be right about your opinions than to be kind to the people around you. You decided it's more important to defeat the other side, to crush your political opponents, than to understand them, to try to see where they're coming from and why they believe what they believe. Man, when you think about it, this is exactly what happens during election time, isn't it? Everyone just wants their side to win. Nobody cares about actually understanding people who think differently. Mr. Eastwood thought about all the conversations he'd had over the years, all the arguments about politics and policy issues, all the debates about what the government should or shouldn't do. He thought about the times when he'd been really angry at people who saw things differently than he did, when he dismissed their concerns or their fears, just pushed them aside as unimportant because those concerns and fears didn't align with his own. It's easy to do that, isn't it? To think that only your own worries and problems matter, and everyone else's are stupid or not real. Finally, Mr. Eastwood asked the question that anyone would ask in this situation. What do you want us to do? How do we fix this huge problem? How do we heal all this division and anger? And Jesus smiled again with that same gentle, knowing smile that seemed to understand everything. It starts with individuals, Jesus said clearly. It always starts with individuals, with one person at a time making a choice. One single person deciding to love instead of hate. One person choosing to forgive someone who hurt them instead of holding a grudge forever. One person having the courage to reach across the divide that separates people and say, "You're my brother, you're my sister. We may disagree about politics or religion or 100 other things, but I will not dehumanize you. I will not treat you like you're not a person. I will not demonize you and make you out to be evil. I will actually try to understand you and where you're coming from." Then something really touching happened. Jesus put his hand on Mr. Eastwood's shoulder, and Mr. Eastwood felt this warmth spread through his entire body, from where Jesus touched him all the way out to his fingers and toes, like the most comforting, peaceful feeling you could possibly imagine. "America has done great things," Jesus said, his voice full of that mixture of pride and sadness again. "You've been a beacon of hope for millions and millions of people around the world. You've welcomed the tired, the poor, the huddled masses, all the people who had nothing and nowhere else to go. You opened your doors to them. You've sacrificed, you've sent your young men and women to fight, and sometimes die to defeat tyranny and dictatorship in other countries. You've innovated and created and built amazing things. You've produced art and music and stories and movies that have inspired the entire world, that have moved people and made them think and feel." But then Jesus' tone got more serious. "But you've also done terrible things. You have to be honest about that too. You've enslaved people, treated them as property, denied them their humanity. You've broken treaties with Native Americans, made promises, and then didn't keep them. You've been greedy, wanting more and more money and power. You've been prideful, thinking you're better than everyone else. You've been cruel to people who were different or vulnerable. Like every nation that has ever existed, like every single person who has ever lived, you are capable of both great good and great evil. The question now," Jesus continued, his voice getting even more intense, "is which will you choose going forward? Will you continue down this path of division and hatred that you're on right now? Will you let fear and anger dictate and control your future? Or will you remember what you were meant to be from the very beginning? Will you remember that love is actually stronger than hate, that forgiveness is more powerful than vengeance and getting revenge, that unity and coming together is more enduring and longer lasting than division and falling apart?" Mr. Eastwood felt tears running down his cheeks at this point, and he said he's not a man who cries easily. He spent his whole life being tough and stoic and not showing emotion. "It seems impossible," Mr. Eastwood said, his voice probably shaking with emotion. "People are so angry right now, so incredibly angry. They're so entrenched in their positions, so dug into their beliefs, that they won't budge even an inch." Jesus responded softly, gently, I know it seems impossible. It seemed impossible for blind people to see, for lame people who couldn't walk to suddenly walk, for dead people to come back to life. But nothing, absolutely nothing, is impossible with God. Nothing is impossible when people choose love over fear. Jesus took his hand away from Mr. Eastwood's shoulder and looked out at the horizon again, toward where the sun was setting. The sun was almost completely gone now, just a sliver of it left, and the first stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky, those pinpricks of light that come out when day turns to night. Tell them this, Jesus said, and now he was giving Mr. Eastwood the message that he was supposed to share with everyone. Tell them that I love them, every single one of them, without exception. The conservatives and the liberals, the believers who have faith and the doubters who aren't sure what they believe, the successful people who have everything, and the struggling people who can barely get by. Tell them that their worth, their value as human beings, doesn't come from their accomplishments, or how much money they have in their bank accounts, or whether their political side wins elections. Their worth comes from the simple fact that they exist, that they are alive, that they are my children, that they are loved beyond measure by me. Wow, what a message, right? That everyone is valuable and loved just because they exist, not because of anything they achieve or accomplish. Tell them, Jesus went on, to put down their weapons. Not physical weapons like guns necessarily, but the weapons of rhetoric, which means harsh and attacking words. The weapons of judgment where you decide someone else is bad or wrong. The weapons of contempt where you treat others as worthless. Tell them to pick up instead the tools of peace, the tools of compassion, which means caring about other people's suffering, the tools of understanding, where you actually try to see things from someone else's point of view, the tools of humility, which means admitting you don't know everything and you might be wrong sometimes. Tell them that it's not weak to admit when you're wrong about something. That's actually strong. It's not naive or stupid to choose mercy over judgment, to give people a break instead of being harsh with them. It's not foolish to believe that things can actually be better, that the world can improve, that people can change. This is such an important message because so many people think that being tough means never admitting mistakes or never showing kindness. But Jesus is saying that's completely wrong. Jesus turned back to look at Mr. Eastwood one last time, and this felt like the ending of their conversation. Tell them, he said, his voice gentle but also firm at the same time, that America's best days can still be ahead of her, still in the future, but only, and this is the crucial part, only if she remembers what she was meant to be. Not a place of perfect people, because that will never exist. No place has ever had only perfect people, but a place where imperfect people strive together, work together towards something better than what they have now. A place where freedom is balanced with responsibility, where people have rights, but also duties to each other. A place where rights are honored, but so are the responsibilities that come with those rights. A place where the strong people protect the weak instead of taking advantage of them. Where the wealthy people with lots of money care for the poor people who don't have enough. Where the majority, the larger group, respects the minority, the smaller group, instead of just forcing them to go along with whatever the majority wants. That's a beautiful vision of what a country could be, isn't it? Tell them, Jesus said, and now his voice was both gentle and firm at the same time, soft but strong. That time is shorter than they think. That life is more precious, more valuable than they realize. That all the arguments they think are so incredibly important right now, all the political fights and debates that consume so much energy and attention, those will fade away and be forgotten eventually. But love endures forever. Love lasts eternally. Love never fails or disappears. At this point in the dream, Mr. Eastwood wanted desperately to ask more questions. He had like 1,000 things he wanted to know, probably questions about the future, about specific issues, about what exactly people should do in different situations. But even as he opened his mouth to start speaking, to ask those questions, he felt himself beginning to wake up from the dream. The desert landscape around him was fading away, getting less solid and real. Jesus' figure was becoming translucent, which means you could see through it like it was made of glass or mist. And Mr. Eastwood was being pulled back, yanked really, into his bedroom in Carmel, back into his aging body that was lying in his bed, back into the regular physical world. The very last thing Mr. Eastwood heard Jesus say before he fully woke up was this, and these were the final words of the entire encounter. Fear not, Clint. I am with you always, even to the end of the age. I am with all of you, not just you, but everyone. I never left. I've been here all along." And then just like that, Mr. Eastwood was awake, completely awake, lying in his bed. He sat up immediately, probably pretty disoriented and confused, and he could still feel the warmth on his shoulder where Jesus had put his hand, like the sensation was still there even though the dream was over. The room around him was dark except for moonlight coming through the window, silver light that made everything look kind of ghostly and unreal. And he could still hear the Pacific Ocean in the distance, making its eternal whooshing sound of waves. But something felt different. Everything felt different. He himself felt different, changed somehow by what had just happened. Mr. Eastwood looked at the clock next to his bed to check the time. It was 2 o'clock in the morning, 2 a.m., which meant he'd been asleep for about 5 hours since he went to bed at 9. But here's the weird thing. Even though 5 hours had passed, it had felt like only minutes in the dream, like almost no time at all. Time works strangely in dreams, doesn't it? Sometimes a dream that feels like it lasts for hours actually only took a few minutes of real time, and sometimes the opposite happens. Mr. Eastwood got out of bed, probably still feeling that warmth and that sense of something important having just happened, and he went to his desk in a room. He turned on the lamp, which must have been really bright after the darkness, and he found a piece of paper and a pen, and then he started writing down everything he could possibly remember from the dream. Every single word that Jesus had said, every tiny detail of that desert landscape, like the color of the sky, and the way the shadows fell, every emotion he'd felt during the conversation. He wrote it all down as fast as he could before he could forget any of it. He wrote continuously for 2 hours straight, his hand moving across page after page. And when he was finally done, when he'd gotten everything out of his head and onto paper, his hand was cramping and hurting from holding the pen so long, and his eyes were tired from focusing on the paper. But he had it all written down, the entire experience preserved in words that he could read later and share with others. Since that night, which was about 3 years before he gave this speech, Mr. Eastwood said he's thought about that encounter with Jesus every single day, without exception. Not a day has gone by where he hasn't remembered it and thought about it and wondered about it. He's thought about Jesus' message, about what he was asked to do, about the responsibility that's been placed on his shoulders. And he admitted honestly that he's wrestled with it, struggled with it, tried to figure out what to do with this information. "I'll be honest with you," Mr. Eastwood told his audience, and you could hear the vulnerability in his voice. "I'm not used to being a messenger, someone who delivers important information from one person to others. I'm used to telling fictional stories, creating characters that don't really exist, exploring themes and ideas through movies. But this is completely different. This isn't fiction. This isn't made up. This is real. This actually happened to me. This is my genuine experience." He said he's asked himself 1,000 times, maybe even more, whether it was really real or just a dream. Was it possible that his subconscious mind, the part of your brain that works without you knowing it, was just working through his concerns and worries about the state of the country? Was his brain playing tricks on him, creating this elaborate experience because he'd been thinking about America's problems? Maybe it was just a very vivid dream and nothing more. These are all reasonable questions that anyone would ask. But deep down, Mr. Eastwood said, in the part of me that knows truth when it encounters it, in the deepest core of my being, I know it was more than just a regular dream. I know that he, Jesus, was really there in some way that I can't fully explain. I know that message was real and true and important. So then the question became, what should he do with this experience? What was he supposed to do with a message from Jesus Christ specifically about America and its problems? At first, he seriously thought about keeping it completely to himself, not telling anyone, just holding on to it as a private experience. "Lord knows," he said, "I don't need people thinking I've lost my mind or gone senile in my old age. I don't need the mockery, people making fun of me. I don't need the skepticism, people saying I'm lying or crazy. I don't need the tabloid headlines in those gossip magazines at the grocery store checkout. Those are all very real concerns for someone famous like him." But, he continued, "every single time I think about staying quiet and not saying anything, I feel that warmth on my shoulder again, that sensation of Jesus' hand touching me. And I remember his last words, 'I am with you always.' So I can't stay silent. I have to tell people. I'm telling you what he told me. And that's exactly what he did that night, standing in front of all those people. He told them, and now we're hearing it too, that we need to love each other again. We need to see each other as human beings, real people with feelings and hopes and fears, not as caricatures which are like exaggerated fake versions of people, and not as enemies who we have to fight or defeat. We need to remember what really actually matters in life. And spoiler alert, it's not the next election, it's not the next controversy that everyone argues about, it's not the next outrage on social media that makes everyone angry for a few days until they forget about it. What really truly matters is how we treat each other every single day, how we care for people who are vulnerable and need help, how we extend grace, which means giving people kindness they don't deserve, and mercy, which means not punishing people even when you could, and compassion, which means actually caring about other people's pain and suffering. Mr. Eastwood was telling everyone that America's problems aren't fundamentally political, meaning they're not really about laws or government or policies at the most basic level. They're spiritual problems. They're about the human heart and soul. And here's a really important point he made. No legislation, no matter how well-intentioned or carefully written, can fix a heart that's been hardened by hate. No policy, no matter how perfectly crafted by the smartest people, can heal a soul that's consumed and eaten up by bitterness and resentment. Only love can do that kind of deep healing. Only forgiveness can do that. Only grace can do that. Now, Mr. Eastwood was realistic about this. He said, I'm not saying this will be easy, that it'll be simple or quick or painless. Jesus himself never promised that following him would be easy. What Jesus did promise was that his yoke, which is like a wooden frame that connects animals together to pull heavy loads, would be easy, and his burden would be light compared to the burden of sin and hatred. But Jesus never said that following him would be comfortable, that it would feel good all the time, or that it would be convenient and fit easily into your life. He never said that loving your enemies would feel nice, or that turning the other cheek instead of fighting back wouldn't hurt. Those things are hard, really hard. But what Jesus did promise, absolutely guaranteed, was that it would be worth it in the end. He promised that love would ultimately triumph over hate. He promised that light would eventually overcome darkness, no matter how dark things get. And he promised that he would be with us every single step of the way, never leaving us alone to figure it out by ourselves. Mr. Eastwood admitted he doesn't know why Jesus chose to appear to him specifically. I don't know why he picked an aging actor and director to deliver this message, he said honestly. Maybe it was because he's made so many movies about flawed, imperfect men trying to find redemption and make up for their mistakes. Maybe it's because he spent his entire career exploring themes of justice and mercy, violence and peace, vengeance and forgiveness through his films. Or maybe, he suggested, it's just because he was willing to listen when Jesus spoke to him, because he was open to receiving the message even though it was completely unexpected and outside his normal experience. But really, the why doesn't matter nearly as much as the what Jesus actually said and what he's asking all of us to do. He's asking us to be better, Mr. Eastwood explained. To do better than we're doing right now, to love more and hate less, to forgive more and judge less, to understand more and condemn less. Jesus is asking us to remember that we're all in this together, all of humanity, all Americans, everyone. We all share the same planet Earth. We all breathe the same air. We all look up at the same stars at night. We're all trying to make sense of this strange and beautiful and difficult thing called life. We're all confused sometimes. We're all scared sometimes. We're all trying our best, even when our best isn't very good. He's asking us to remember that before we are Americans, before we identify with our nationality, we are humans. We're part of the human family. And even before we are humans, we are God's children. All of us, without any exceptions whatsoever. Nobody left out. Now I know, Mr. Eastwood said, acknowledging that not everyone in his audience would agree with everything he was saying, I know some of you don't believe in God at all. You think the universe is just random, and there's no divine being watching over us. I know some of you don't believe in Jesus specifically. Maybe you follow a different religion or no religion at all. I know some of you think this whole story I've told tonight is either a complete fabrication, something I made up for attention, or a delusion, something my aging brain imagined that isn't real. And that's okay. You don't have to believe in my encounter with Jesus to hear the message. You don't have to be religious or have any particular faith to recognize the truth in what he said. Because think about it, the core message is something anyone can agree with regardless of their beliefs. We do need to love each other more. That's just obviously true. We do need to stop demonizing and making enemies out of people who disagree with us. That's just common sense. We do need to remember our common humanity, the fact that we're all people with the same basic needs and desires. These aren't just religious principles that only apply to Christians, Mr. Eastwood pointed out. They're human principles. They're the foundation, the base of any healthy society, any functioning democracy, any community that's actually worth living in. Mr. Eastwood then got kind of personal and vulnerable. I'm an old man now, he said, stating the obvious since he's over 90 years old. I don't know how many years I have left on this earth. It could be 1 year, it could be 5 years, hopefully more, but who knows? But I know this. I know for certain what I want to do with whatever time I have remaining. He said he wants to spend that time trying to live out the message Jesus gave him, trying to love more even when it's hard, trying to understand people better even when they frustrate him, trying to bridge the divides between people instead of widening them and making them worse. He said he wants America to remember what she was meant to be from the very beginning. Not perfect, he clarified. We never were perfect, and we never will be. No country is or ever has been. But striving, always trying to move toward that more perfect union that the Constitution talks about. Always trying to form a better, more just, more compassionate society than what we have today. That's what Jesus wants for us too, Mr. Eastwood assured everyone. Not perfection, because he knows we're not capable of that. We're human and flawed. But progress, movement in the right direction even if it's slow. Not instant transformation where everything changes overnight, but gradual growth over time. Not flawless execution where we do everything right, but faithful effort where we honestly try our best even when we mess up. And then Mr. Eastwood made it personal for everyone listening. He looked out at his audience and said, so I'm asking you, all of you, regardless of your politics, whether you're liberal or conservative, regardless of your religion, whether you're Christian or Jewish or Muslim or atheist or anything else, regardless of your background, where you came from or what you've been through, I'm asking you to think about something important. What can you do? What specific action can you take? What can you do today, right now, not tomorrow or next week, but today, to love someone you disagree with? That's a challenging question, isn't it? It's easy to love people who agree with you, who think like you, who are on your team. But can you show love to someone who voted differently than you, who has opposite political views, who you've maybe been angry at? What can you do to extend grace instead of judgment? Can you give someone a break instead of being harsh with them when they make a mistake? What can you do to build a bridge instead of a wall? Can you reach out and try to connect with someone instead of putting up barriers and shutting them out? These are hard questions, but important ones. Mr. Eastwood's advice was to start small. Don't try to change the whole world at once because that's overwhelming. Start with one person, he said. Start with one conversation where you actually listen to someone who thinks differently than you. Start with one choice, one single decision to see someone else's humanity, to recognize that they're a real person with real feelings, instead of just seeing their ideology or their political label. And then, here's the key part, do it again tomorrow. And then do it again the next day. And then do it again the day after that. Keep doing it over and over, making that choice repeatedly. That's how we change a culture, Mr. Eastwood explained. That's how we heal a nation that's divided and hurting. One person at a time, one act of love at a time, one choice to be better at a time. It's not flashy or dramatic, it won't make headlines, but it works. Mr. Eastwood then summed up everything he'd been saying. Jesus appeared to me in a dream, he stated clearly, and he told me something about America. He told me that we're in trouble, serious trouble, but we're not beyond hope, it's not too late. He told me that we're divided right now, split apart into opposing camps, but we can be united again if we choose to be. He told me that we've lost our way, we've forgotten our purpose and our values, but we can find it again, we can remember, and get back on track. He told me that he loves us, all of us, every single American, and really every single person on earth, more than we can possibly imagine or comprehend. And he's asking us, requesting us, pleading with us, to love each other the way he loves us, unconditionally and completely. That's the message, Mr. Eastwood said, his voice probably tired but determined. That's what I came here to tell you tonight. That's why I'm standing up here, sharing something so personal and unusual. He was realistic about how people would react. I don't expect everyone to believe me, he admitted. I know some of you think I'm crazy or senile or making this up. I don't expect this to change everything overnight. I'm not naive enough to think one speech will fix all of America's problems. But I do hope that maybe it will change something in someone. Maybe just one person will hear this message and decide to be a little kinder tomorrow than they were today. Maybe someone will choose to be a little more patient with people who annoy them. Maybe someone will decide to be a little more loving instead of a little more hateful. And that would be enough. That would be a start. Because that's how it starts, he explained. With individuals making individual choices, one person at a time deciding to be better. And then those individuals inspire others by their example. And those others inspire still more people. And gradually, slowly, but steadily, like a stone creating ripples in a pond, things begin to change. The culture shifts. The nation heals. People remember how to love each other. Mr. Eastwood concluded by connecting this to his whole life's work. I've spent my entire life telling stories, he said. Stories about heroes and villains, about justice and injustice, about the eternal struggle between good and evil that plays out in every human heart. But the best story, the truest and most important story, is the one we're living right now, in this very moment. The story of imperfect people trying to build a better world, even though they keep making mistakes. The story of broken people seeking redemption and healing. The story of divided people finding unity and coming together. That's the story Jesus wants us to write with our lives, Mr. Eastwood said powerfully. That's the story he believes we can write if we choose to. And, you know what? I believe it too. I believe we can do this. I believe America can remember what she was meant to be. I believe we can love each other again. I believe we can heal. And then he ended with simple but heartfelt words. Thank you for listening to an old man's strange tale. Thank you for being open enough to hear this message. God bless you all, every single one of you. And God bless America. May she find her way back to her true purpose. If this incredible story has touched your heart, if it's made you think about how you treat other people, if it's inspired you to maybe be a little kinder or more understanding, then please take a second right now to like this video and share it with your friends and family who need to hear this message. Subscribe to our channel so you never miss more amazing stories like this one. And most importantly, think about what you can do today, right now, to love someone you've been struggling with. Can you reach out to that family member you haven't talked to because of political disagreements? Can you be kind to that coworker who drives you crazy? Can you forgive someone who hurt you? That's how we change the world, one small act of love at a time. Stay blessed, everyone, and remember, we're all in this together.